My fabulous colleagues will definitely be letting more people into the room as we get some stragglers to trickle in. My name is Chester Lee. I'm one of the assistant directors over here at Off-Campus Engagement and Support. Joining me today for our presentation, we have a couple of community ambassadors. We also have the rest of the team here in the chat and in the room, just so that we're all here, to support everybody living off campus. But I will let my co-presenter introduce herself before we get started.
Hi, my name is Kessia. I'm a community ambassador, a student here, and I look forward to presenting. Please feel free to ask any questions and we'll be able to address them in the chat.
There we go. Okay, to start off, just a little bit about our office. We are located in 151 Spear Hall. You can reach us at either our phone or our email. And we kind of cover 3 areas in our office to help students with their off-campus life at Northeastern. The first and foremost is our apartment search process. We maintain a database. We have events such as this, like our apartment fair, both in person and virtual. We work with a lot of realtors and we help students with scam awareness. Our second area is we definitely help after that apartment search process with renters' rights, from everything from leases to tenant responsibilities and knowing kind of just what Boston rules and regulations are. And the third of which is our community ambassadors run a plethora of programs, including our breakfast club cleanups, our social media content, and off-campus adventures that we go to the aquarium, we've gone up to Salem. So we have a lot of programming as well. And you should definitely follow us on social media to learn more about those. So just a quick overview of our short 30-minute presentation today. We're going to cover 6 areas from budgeting to apartment search, to your leases, to the subletting process, to scams, and then to renters' rights and responsibilities. And to start us off, Kessia is going to talk about budgeting.
Hi, everyone. So yes, budgeting is such an important component of moving off campus, whether you're an international student or a domestic student. Really organizing your finances will really help you in the long run on figuring out all the circumstances of living off campus. So we usually like to break it down to help students, for example, figuring out where your main income is coming from. And that can depend from student to student. It might be family or co-op salaries, savings, financial aids. And once you established where your main income is coming from, we suggest students to then budget a schedule of how they're going to be distributing that income. Living off campus has a lot of expenses such as rent, utilities, foods, transportation. Maybe you have some goals, social events. So figuring out when you'll be allocating your income to each of these categories will be really essential, especially those that have monthly, like utilities, monthly dues. So yes, there's things like one-time expenses when moving off campus. For example, first and last month's rent. That's definitely going to be a one-time expense that you're going to be expected to bring up front. There's going to be security deposit, realtor, and other fees if you decide to go with that. There might be furniture that you have to buy if you're moving into an empty apartment, and moving expenses like boxes, U-Haul trucks that you might need to rent. Then there's monthly expenses, as I've mentioned: rent, utilities, cable or internet, groceries, transportation, and renter's insurance, which we all provide resources to if you have any questions or need guidance on how to break down those costs. So this is a brief breakdown of the neighborhoods, the main neighborhoods in Boston, and the rough average costs for apartments. So for example, we have Allston, which is a very popular neighborhood. And for each category, there's a studio apartment. And then this is the rough expected rent per month that most studios in Allston's cost. Or for example, another popular neighborhood, which is Mission Hill, a 4-bedroom apartment will be costing roughly $4,300 to $6,000 a month. So this is a good guide if you are unsure which neighborhood you want to pick, based on your budget and your costly needs. This is a great place to start looking to find what neighborhood will suit best your budget.
Yeah, and Rhythm will post this one in the chat. It is on our website so that it's available, and we try to update it at least constantly. But real estate cost changes.
So yes, apartment search resources. Northeastern has a plethora of apartment search resources, but before we start, there's the important 4 Ps of the apartment search. So first of all is the price. Know the rental prices and upfront costs of the apartments that you might be interested in, and be wary of prices that look too low or too high, because those could all be red flags. So familiarize yourself with the market and what the general prices are, and the previous table is a good guide to get started. The second P is people. So will you be needing roommates? Will you want realtors, a landlord, neighbors? What type of neighbors? Do you want more student-friendly neighborhood or a quieter, more family-based neighborhood? These are all things to consider. Roommates will definitely have an impact on the cost of the apartment since you're splitting the rent. So another thing that you might want to consider. The third P is paperwork. So there's there's applications, there's cosigner and guarantor forms that are required when signing up for a lease, an apartment. There's addenda, which we'll cover more in the following slides. And lastly, pictures. It's super important to document the condition of the apartment at the move-in and move-out date. And that includes pictures of maybe scratched walls or, dented surfaces. These will all be really important for when it comes time to security deposits. Yeah. So Northeastern's database, I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. This is a really great database that not only offers a place to start searching for housing, but also roommates, and connects you to realtors that have been verified by Northeastern. So this is really a great place to start. You can set up a roommate profile and make yourself a little advertisement for yourself, basically saying, I'm interested in living in this neighborhood. I'm looking for these types of roommates. This is my budget. You can sort through apartments based on filter location or amount of beds, and contact directly the realtors and property managers attached to these apartments, which have also usually worked with students and are familiar with the process of possibly needing a cosigner and international students. And so another really amazing resource that we have is our Yammer page, which you can follow. This is a great place that's very active with people that post sublets. Maybe you're looking for a short-term lease that is only a few months long. This is a great place where people will be like, I'm leaving the country for a few months. I need someone to fill my space for the summer. So if you're looking for quicker term, shorter leases, this is a great place, but it's also a great place to connect and find roommates, for example. People are always active, so this is a really good resource too. So Be a Lease Genius. This is a program that we have to help really empower students in the reading and understanding of leases and applications. Boston, like many other states, has a specific system when it comes to renting. So the first one is the applications for an apartment. So you find an apartment that you really like, you'll have to submit an application where usually it'll include financial and security checks, credit card checks, cosigner information, deposits, fine print and application fees. And that's very standard for Boston. And then the next part is the lease. And the lease will include dates, rental amounts, all fields that need to be completed, addendum clauses, who's going to be living there. And though it looks like a daunting process, we have step-by-step guides. And important to know is that the first month's rent is normal to put down as a deposit, and it is refundable until the lease is signed. And realtors and landlords should provide a payment schedule for the first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit and or broker fee. And security deposit will usually be reimbursed 30 days after the move out if there's no problems that have incurred. So information that's included in leases, they're usually quite densely packed, but this Lease Genius really helps break down the information. There's the required information that's always going to be there, and it's really a green flag to look for. So names, address, contact information of the landlord and maintenance, rental costs and due dates, lease terms, start and end dates, and all the tenants' names. So it means everyone that's living in there, their names have to be on the lease. Then there's lease basics like legally binding contract between you and the landlord, and includes the terms and agreements of the specific apartment and place that you're leasing. And lastly, there's the addendum information, which is usually at the end of the lease, for who pays the rent, the parking rules, maintenance rules, noise rules, pet policies. This may contain some concerning clause, so never skip looking at the addendum, and they can sometimes be negotiable. And these are some examples of it. The addendums, like a subletting policy. Some apartments don't like subletting. They will charge a high steep fee for a sublet. There's sometimes trash and fine policies, noise violations. For example, if you're being too loud past 10 p.m., you might be violated. You might be penalized for that. Pests and molds are also very common. There's usually always going to be a smoking policy. And guest policy, for example, guests are not allowed to stay for more than 3 days. So these are all things to look out for. So legal and illegal clauses in Boston. This is important, so you know that your rights, and if you ever encounter a landlord that's trying to take advantage of you of some sort, you know that there are definitely some laws that support renters. So legal clauses include cleaning, noise and trash fees, sublet and roommate changes fees, as per mentioned in each unique clause that each lease will have. Illegal clauses are pest fees. For example, you might have bed mites bed bugs in your apartment, or mice. It's not your responsibility to pay for that unless you are consistently really supporting this problem by, for example, not cleaning the food up and things like that. Another illegal clause, snow removal, pet fees, and routine maintenance fees. And you can consider negotiating the notice of entry fee, yes. We have this really great informational brochure, which you definitely can have access to on our website, and a great video-based and web page that really informs you on everything, step-by-step, check boxes on what to look out for in a lease. And we really recommend that you use this online resource. And if you have specific questions on a clause that's maybe worded a little bit complicated, you're not sure what they're actually asking for, be sure to submit a Lease Genius form, and we can help you understand each clause.
Thanks, Cassia. I am going to move into the next few sections, starting with subletting. Subletting is very common in Boston, especially among students. The reason for this is obviously the Boston lease generally runs from September to August. So that's 3 semesters, fall, spring, and summer. And there's a lot of students studying abroad, there's students on co-op. So you want to really make sure that if you plan to do a co-op or study abroad or be away, that you are allowed to sublet, first of all, as Cassia just mentioned, in your lease. There are some leases that prevent subletting. So if you plan to be away for any reason, you should really make sure that you are allowed to sublet. This allows you to rent out your room to other people, so you're not paying extra rent or double rent when you're away. And the steps for the subletting is, first of all, plan. So if you know you're going to sublet in advance, see if you know somebody that's coming back from study abroad or co-op that needs a place, post on the database, post in the Yammer community, and make sure that it is allowed by the landlord. As I mentioned, it should be in the lease, but you also need to have the permission of the landlord in a lot of cases where subletting is allowed. Sometimes there's a small fee associated with subletting, sometimes there isn't. You'll need to check your lease for that. And then you'll want to provide the copy of the original lease to your subletter, and also create a kind of sublet contract to avoid any confusion. Just like you signed the lease, you want to make sure that there's a subletting lease with exact dates, how to pay, and anything else that you might need as details for this legally binding contract. So a good infographic that's also on our website, a step-by-step, is this one on how to sublet. As I just mentioned before, you'll want to get permission first. You'll want to then list the room, If you have roommates, you want to make sure that all the roommates are involved in the process. So also kind of vet the new subletter. You want to pay any fees, create the agreement, and then you want to make sure that you have every detail hammered out and saved for legal reasons. And now we're going to move into scams. So one of the big things is that scammers do target students. So we try to inform students as much as we can on possible ways to prevent being scammed. Our database is a good place to start. We partner with apartments.com that does an initial level of vetting for us. So most of the listings on the database are definitely safe, but you still want to do your own research. We had the good rental chart that we provide on our website and that Cassia showed before about average rates and ranges in neighborhoods. So you really want to stick to that. If it's outside of that, it could be a scam, especially if it's on the lower end. And you also just want to look out for the other red flags. If there's no picture, they don't ask for any paperwork, they're not allowing any in-person showings, they're mailing you physical keys, there's paperwork you've never seen before, they offer a lot of refunds, and there's like no rating on the listings. And a couple of resources you can use to kind of prevent scams is all licensed realtors in Massachusetts have to have a license that can be publicly checked on the mass.gov site. Once again, all this information is also on our website, but it's also easily Googleable. So the first is, if you're working with realtor, is to do a realtor check. The second thing is you want to assess your property. So if you're looking at a property, you can use the City of Boston site to see who actually owns it, if they're the right person, if there's any other things associated with the past. And then with that same address, you can use RentSmart Boston to see if they've had any violations in the past few years. More often than not, you'll see a few violations, such as overfilling of the trash can is a common one, snow, ice violations. Those are not things to be super concerned about, but it's good to know that they exist. And so using these resources, you can kind of check out your property to prevent yourself from being scammed. If you do get scammed, unfortunately, there are students that do. We have places where you can work with to report the scam, including the local police, the FTC, the IC3, and these are all scary acronyms, and we're happy to help you, but we want to really prevent you from getting scammed so you don't have to get to this point. On to our last section of renters' rights and responsibilities. As mentioned in the lease section as well, you have a lot of rights as a tenant. Your realtor must be licensed and practicing legally. Your apartment is safe and sanitary. The maintenance schedule and contact is listed on the lease. Housing codes are kept up to date, and security deposit procedures are adhered to. But you also have some responsibilities. You need to pay the rent as outlined by the lease, either on the end of the month, first of the month, by either check, electronic, however the lease dictates. You also need to keep your unit clean and orderly. As much as the landlord is not allowed to charge for pest removal, if you are the cause of the pests, like you leaving the trash out, as Kessia said, that is not okay. You have a responsibility to keep everything clean and orderly so there's no issues with it. You report maintenance issues. A small leak is something you need to report because it could turn into a bigger leak later. And if you have roommates, you're all responsible. You are all in this together. And we talked about the lease clauses and the addendum clauses a little earlier, so I won't need to go through those again. On the landlord side, a lot of this is repetitive, but we really want to make sure that you know what the landlord is responsible for, what you're responsible for keeping these apartments in a orderly fashion. Their contact information and the maintenance contact information should always be on the lease. Make sure that's on the lease when you read it. They are required to provide a safe environment, pest-free environment, water, heat, appliances that are outlined in the lease. And a tenant cannot, or a landlord cannot retaliate against tenants for exercising their rights. Our website offers a lot of legal resources and City of Boston resources, such as reporting to the Inspectional Services Department if a unit is not being kept up to code. So these are all kind of the landlord's rights as well. Kessia highlighted one that I want to reiterate now is the right to enter. The landlord will always have a reason to enter because they will need to rent it out to the next tenants. They will need to do maintenance, but they have to give you a notice to enter, except in emergency situations. So this is something in the lease that you really, really want to hammer out. Usually it's 24 hours, maybe 12 hours. About the notice to enter for your unit. And the lease, once again, is a legally binding contract. So anything in the lease is, if it's in the lease and you don't abide by it, that is something that the landlord can pursue legal action for, or you can pursue legal action for against the landlord as well. So just want to make sure to really read that lease, ask us for help if you need it. But that is kind of the piece of paper or document that you will be using to double check everything. And in some places in Boston, utilities are sub-metered so that it's not a general for just the whole unit. I think it's mostly in older buildings. So that's just something to watch out for in your lease as well. And just some general City of Boston rules and regulations. The no more than 4 is an ordinance that prevents no more than 4 unrelated persons from living in the same unit. Obviously, if a building has like multiple units, more than 4 people can live in them if you're all friends, but it's just within one unit, no more than 4 unrelated persons can live together. This is to avoid overcrowding and unsafe kind of just fire code issues. Legal fees, we discussed this before. First month, last month security, broker, key replacement fee is also becoming more common. And then the payment schedule, that should once again be outlined in your lease, when it's paid, how it's being paid, where your security deposit's going, etc. And for the apartment condition statement, this is what Kessia talked about in the 4 Ps, the last P, those pictures. Within 15 days of moving in, you want to protect your security deposit. You want to take pictures of anything that's already damaged so that you don't have to pay for it later on, and submit this back to the landlord. We are happy to give you a form of what you should be looking for. We have a checklist online. So this is just something that you really, really should be doing after you move in as well. And the last thing is our office does a lot of programming opportunities. You should definitely follow us on social media to look out for our trips, whether it be to the aquarium, to Salem, just local cafes. Yeah, we have a lot of fun stuff besides just helping students find off-campus properties. And here is our contact information. I think this is the slide I will leave up for the time being. And we do have a few minutes. I'm going to introduce our other community ambassadors for any of you that want to ask. They're also students too. They all live off campus. So with us, besides Kessia, we have Amber and we have Rhythm. So we're going to leave 5 minutes so that you can ask them questions. And then I'm going to give you kind of the procedure of how to visit our virtual realtors. You can either raise your hand or just shout out, I guess. let's do hand raising. That'll be best.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you. So, you mentioned the no more than 4 rules. So, is that applicable to a studio?
Yes, you're not supposed to have more than 4 people in any one unit. There are some occasions where if it's in your lease, like if you have a large enough unit that the lease will allow it, but that's just a City of Boston ordinance that you're not supposed to have more than 4 unrelated people in one unit.
Okay, so my question is that I have 3 people in my family. So if I rent a studio, is that allowed?
If you're related, yeah, so it's more than 4 unrelated people.
So this is a legal requirements. If the studio status should be no more than 2, so it's it is the requirement from the provider.
Yeah, so if first of all, it's a city of Boston regulation, and second of all, if it's in the lease that it says no more than 2, you have to follow that lease. You can try to negotiate it, but the city of Boston requirement is no more than 4. But if your lease says no more than 2, then it's no more than 2.
Thank you very much.
నేను ఎనిమిదింటికో ఎనిమిదింటికో తీసుకెళ్తాను.
If you're not asking a question, if you could please mute yourself, that would be great.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
What is a time frame that you recommend if you know you're going on a co-op, say spring, and you know you're going to have to leave campus? What is the latest that you should begin the apartment or sublet search for when you want to return? Or for any of these, I don't know what you call it, any of these time periods, these semesters?
Yeah, so the answer in general is always as soon as possible. But so let's say you're coming in the fall semester, but you're going to be on co-op in the spring, and then you're coming back for the summer. Is that
That could be a
timeline?
situation, or it could be you are going away in the fall, but then you're returning in the spring.
So the answer is as soon as possible, but the cycles that run in Boston, especially for semesterly, are kind of more so if you are looking for something for the spring, starting in January. You should usually start, I would say, around the end of September, beginning of October as like the early point, because during September, there are still a lot of people looking for last minute housing for the fall. So you don't want to get inundated by that information. So anytime after the end of September is a good place to look for the spring. And then if you're looking for the summer, it's the same thing. At the end of January, beginning of February is where you want to start looking for the summer. And it's also, this is kind of the weird part, is if you're looking for the next fall, the end of January and beginning of February is also when you want to start looking for the next fall, because since most leases run from September to August, that is kind of the largest demand. And everybody starts looking pretty early for those. They start as early as January. Some start as early as kind of October, November for the following fall. But if you want to avoid kind of all the extra information and the being inundated with information you don't need, I would start at kind of at the end of September and end of January for the respective cycles.
Thank you.
How common are realtors used to find places in Boston? Is it required, or is it uncommon, or how does it work?
It's not required. I would say, unfortunately, Boston is one of the last major cities where realtors are still used a lot, and there's still a broker's fee. I would say the majority of our listings have realtors associated them, mostly because of the landlords. It has nothing to do with the realtors. The landlords just choose to hire a realtor to do their listings. And then because they hire a realtor, then you do have to go through the realtor in order to list. But if you find a landlord that doesn't use a realtor, you're happy. I'm happy to avoid that broker's fee, but it is fairly common to use realtors in Boston.
Okay, but not using a realtor is not a warning flag for a.
No, there are definitely individual property owners that list by themselves that don't have realtors, but it's basically on the property owner end. If they've hired a realtor, then you have to use that realtor. If they haven't, then you really don't.
Is a realtor fee typically a month's rent, or is it?
Correct. It is usually up to 1 month's rent. Sometimes it's a half month's rent, but it's usually 1 month's rent in Boston.
If you're renewing to the next year, you can usually avoid that fee again, or do you pay it again?
Correct. That is going to be something that's outlined in the lease, but in most cases, if everybody on the original lease is staying for the following lease, you don't have to pay the realtor's fee again. If I think sometimes even half the people are saying you don't have to pay the fee, but in some cases where only like one person is staying, but all the other people are switching, you might have to pay a new fee. But that is going to be outlined in the lease, and we're happy to help go through the lease with you to try to negotiate that away if that becomes the case.
Thank you.
So we are at the end of our time. We will still be around to answer questions, but we want to make sure we get you out to our realtors. We have about 18 realtors with listings today that they are virtually showing. I'm going to post, just in case you don't have it, the apartment fair link in the chat, but feel free to pop back into this room. Oh, sorry, that's everyone in meeting. There we go. Feel free to pop back into our live Q&A session or pop back into this room if you have any other questions. And you can always email us at offcampus@northeastern.edu. But for right now, we're going to try to direct everybody to our actual apartment fair. So Lexi, take it away.
Yes, hello everyone.